Have you ever sat quietly in your favorite chair, looked at your grown children, and wondered, when did everything change? Once, they were the little ones clinging to your hand. You chose their clothes, packed their lunches, guided their every step. And now, they have homes of their own, opinions of their own, and sometimes they even challenge yours. It can feel strange, even painful. The love is still there, but the closeness, it feels different, doesn't it? As we grow older, many of us begin to crave not just care from our children, but their emotional presence. We want to feel seen, respected, and yes, loved. That longing is natural. But somewhere along the way, some parents, without even realizing it, start using love as a kind of bargaining chip. I gave you everything, so now you must. Sound familiar? It might be uncomfortable to admit, but it's something worth thinking about. The truth is, our children are not extensions of us. They are individuals with dreams, struggles, and choices we may not always agree with. And that's okay. The relationship between parent and child isn't about control. It's about connection. And connection can only happen when there's respect on both sides. You see, some parents fall into a quiet trap I call emotional debt. They believe that because they sacrificed so much, and yes, we really did, our children owe us unquestioning obedience. But love isn't a transaction. It's not, I give, so you must repay. It's, I give because I love you, and I trust that love to grow naturally. What often happens instead is a cycle of disappointment. Parents feel hurt when children don't meet expectations. Children feel suffocated by pressure and guilt. And over time, that gap widens. Words become fewer. Visits become shorter. And both sides carry silent wounds that no one wants to admit. So how do we begin to mend this? One small but powerful shift is to stop leading with our authority and start leading with our humanity. Instead of saying, I'm your mother, you must listen, try asking, can we talk about this together? Instead of repeating, I know what's best, try wondering out loud, what do you think would work best for you? These are tiny changes, but they soften the tone. They open the door. Another habit that pushes our children away, often without us realizing, is constant criticism. You might think you're just being honest, pointing out flaws so they can do better. But when a child hears, you can't do this, or you're not good at that, again and again over the years, it doesn't push them to grow. It makes them shrink. It tells them, you are not enough. And no one thrives under that message. Not at 10 years old, not at 50. You may be thinking, but I only said those things because I wanted them to be strong. I believe you. We all wanted to prepare our children for the world. But strength isn't built on fear of failure. It's built on encouragement, on knowing someone believes in you even when you fall. So what's the alternative? Start by seeing your child as a whole person. Notice what they do well. Compliment them sincerely. Thank them for small gestures. You'll be surprised at how even grown children blossom under gentle praise. If your son cooks dinner, don't say, finally, you did something useful. Say, that was really thoughtful of you, thank you. If your daughter forgets to call, don't lead with, you never care about me. Try, I missed hearing your voice. Can we talk soon? Words shape relationships. And when we choose words that invite closeness instead of shame, the bond becomes stronger. Of course, not all relationships are easy to fix. Some families carry years of misunderstandings. Some children carry deep hurt. But healing can begin with one honest moment. A single conversation that starts with, I may not have always said it right, but I love you, and I want us to feel closer. It doesn't matter who says it first. What matters is that someone dares to soften. Someone chooses to reach instead of retreat. And that someone can be you. Let's pause here for a moment. Maybe you're feeling a mix of emotions, hope, regret, even sadness. That's okay. it means your heart is still open. And that's the best place to start. Because this journey, this chapter of life we're in, it's not about reclaiming control. It's about rediscovering connection, about learning to relate to our children not just as their parents, but as fellow humans walking alongside them in a complicated world. And that shift, that opening of the heart, it might just change everything. Sometimes we think that by letting go a little, we'll lose our children's respect. But what if the opposite is true? What if, by showing trust, we invite trust in return? You see, many of us come from a generation where obedience was valued more than open dialogue. We were taught to obey our elders, not to question them. So naturally, we may carry those expectations into our own role as aging parents. But our children were raised in a different world, a world where asking why is not a sign of disrespect, but a sign of awareness. And perhaps, just perhaps, our willingness to evolve with them is the very thing that keeps our relationship alive. I want to share a story that touched me deeply. A woman I know, 58 years old, already retired, decided to care for her mother-in-law who had dementia. At first, it felt like a natural way to repay kindness. The old woman had helped raise her children and had always treated her well. So, when the illness worsened, the daughter-in-law thought, I owe her this. She brought her into her home, made the place safe, adjusted her life, even received some help from siblings. But as time passed, the situation became overwhelming. The mother-in-law no longer recognized anyone. She started to bite, soil herself, and lash out. Slowly, that sense of duty turned into a quiet torment. Why am I telling you this? Because I know some of you might be in similar situations, or might soon face them. You might feel like the only way to be a good child or a good parent is to do everything yourself. But the truth is, caregiving when done alone and without rest can become not just physically exhausting, but emotionally destructive. The woman in the story began to fall apart. Her health declined, her patience evaporated, and her sense of self started to vanish. And then something powerful happened. She made the decision to let go, not of love, not of respect, but of the belief that only she could carry this burden. Her husband helped her move the mother-in-law to a professional care facility. At first, she felt guilty. But soon, she realized that this choice, though painful, was one made from love, not selfishness. And most importantly, it gave her space to recover, to breathe, and to still be present in her mother-in-law's life without losing her own. Let's take a breath together here. If you are someone who has cared for an elderly parent or are preparing for that possibility, please know this. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to ask for help. And choosing professional care is not abandonment. It's one way, one very real and responsible way, of loving with wisdom. You know, we often believe that being filial means sacrificing everything. But there is a better way. Filial piety is not about becoming a martyr. It's about showing respect, presence, and responsibility in a way that still honors your own life. Because how can we care for others if we ourselves are broken? I spoke to another man recently. He's 63, retired early because of illness. He and his wife were financially stable, had a loving and independent son, and parents on both sides who were healthy. For a while, retirement felt like a dream. They traveled, sang karaoke, enjoyed life. But that changed the day his mother fell and became partially paralyzed. Suddenly, their roles shifted from retirees to caregivers. At first, they hired help. But after his father passed away unexpectedly, his mother's personality changed. She rejected every caregiver. The man and his wife moved back to care for her directly. What followed was 4 years of relentless responsibility: feeding, cleaning, lifting, turning, changing diapers, managing medications. He told me that what hurt the most wasn't the physical work, but the loss of freedom, of dignity, of peace. And what touched me deeply was his honesty. He said, "Even with money, old age is hard. No matter how prepared you are, There are things no amount of savings can ease. That's a truth many of us don't like to hear, but we must face. Aging is not just about preparing financially. It's about preparing emotionally. About strengthening the family bond before the crisis comes. About building understanding and compassion between generations so that when help is needed, it comes from a place of choice, not pressure. From love, not obligation. You see, our children may be willing to help. But we can make it easier or harder by how we treat them now. If we raise them in guilt, they'll come close with resentment. If we raise them with respect, they'll come close with love. That's the difference. So, here's something I invite you to think about right now. What kind of energy do you want to exist in your family when you're no longer strong? What kind of relationship are you shaping today? The good news is, it's never too late to shift. A small change in how we speak. A gentle hand instead of a hard demand. A pause before judging. These simple things can rebuild a bridge that might have felt broken. Let your children see you not just as their parent, but as a person with kindness, vulnerability, and the courage to change. Because sometimes, it's that courage, not age, not power, that earns their deepest respect. There's something deeply humbling about growing older. The body slows down. The mirror shows a softer version of who we once were. And yet, inside, our need for love, connection, and purpose remains just as strong, maybe even stronger. In this season of life, what we often crave most isn't luxury or recognition. It's peace. And nothing brings peace quite like harmony within the family. But harmony, as we've seen, doesn't come automatically with age. It must be nurtured, especially in our relationship with our children. Many of us still carry the belief that because we have been through more, we have the final say in everything. That's understandable. After all, we've sacrificed so much. We know what hardship looks like. We've survived wars, economic downturns, sleepless nights raising them. But wisdom isn't only found in years lived. Sometimes it's found in moments of silence, in letting our children speak and truly hearing them, not just with our ears, but with our hearts. I met a woman recently who shared something simple but profound. She said, "When I stopped needing to be right all the time, my daughter started calling me every day." What changed? Not the daughter. The mother changed the way she listened. Instead of correcting or offering advice every time, she began to say, "That must be hard," or "I'm proud of how you're handling this." That shift opened a door. A small door maybe, but it led to warmth, to closeness, to trust. Sometimes we forget. Our children, too, are tired. They're juggling work, marriage, parenting, finances, their own health. And while we may not agree with how they live, we can still offer something priceless, our understanding. This understanding becomes even more vital when illness or old age truly sets in. Let's talk honestly. When we can no longer move around freely, when we begin to depend on others for daily tasks, the family dynamic changes. And it's not always easy. You might remember the story I mentioned earlier, of the man caring for his paralyzed mother. Despite having a strong pension and an independent son, the weight of caregiving was overwhelming. He and his wife worked tirelessly, cleaning, cooking, turning her in bed, assisting with bowel movements. Even with money, he realized, the emotional toll was heavy. And what struck him the most was how his mother, who had always been strong, was now living every day without autonomy or dignity. That is the harsh truth many of us will face sooner or later. And it begs an important question. How can we prepare not just our children, but ourselves for that reality? The answer, in part, lies in letting go of pride. It's okay to say, "I need help." It's okay to plan ahead, to explore assisted living, to accept the support of professionals. That doesn't mean we are weak. It means we are wise enough to protect the well-being of those we love, especially when our needs exceed their ability to provide. Letting someone else bathe you, dress you, feed you. It's not easy to accept. But when we do so without bitterness, we allow our children to be present in a different, more loving way. Not as nurses, but as sons and daughters. I also want to speak to another feeling many parents won't admit out loud: fear. Fear that our children will abandon us, that we'll be forgotten, left behind, that once we're no longer useful, we'll simply be a burden. If you've ever felt that way, even just for a moment, please hear this. Your worth does not fade with age. You are still a source of wisdom, of warmth, of identity for your family. You are still needed. Maybe not in the same way as before, but in a way that matters deeply. But for our children to feel that too, we must meet them halfway. We must make it easier for them to come close. That means releasing control, reducing criticism, and embracing change. Try replacing instructions with questions. Instead of, "Why don't you ever visit?" Try, "I'd love to spend more time with you. When would be good?" Instead of, "You never listen." Say, "I want to understand what you're going through. Can we talk?" These small shifts don't demand much effort, but they often spark big changes. You might be surprised at how much your children want to be near you, once they feel safe, not judged, once they feel valued for who they are now, not for how well they follow your expectations. And here's something else to remember. Your relationship with your children is not meant to stay the same forever. It's meant to evolve. Just like seasons. In youth, we guide them. In their adulthood, we walk beside them. And in our later years, we lean on each other in different ways. So let go of the idea that closeness must look like daily phone calls or full-time caregiving. Sometimes love looks like space, like a quiet confidence that even if they're far, they still carry you in their heart. If we approach our children not as rulers of their lives, but as companions on this shared journey, the bond not only survives, it flourishes. You've done so much for your family already. You don't have to prove anything more. Now is the time to open your arms, your heart, and trust in the seeds of love you've planted over the years. With care, those seeds can still grow into something beautiful, something lasting. As we sit here quietly reflecting on everything we've lived through, one truth becomes clear. Family is not about perfection. It's about presence. It's about trying again, forgiving more quickly, and loving through the messy, ordinary, complicated days. Especially in this chapter of life, when our pace slows down but our hearts still long to be understood, the family bond becomes more precious than ever. Some of us might carry regrets, words we didn't say, mistakes we made when our children were small, harsh words spoken in anger, times we were too tired to listen, too worried to notice what they needed. But let me tell you something you might need to hear today. It's not too late. It's not too late to apologize if needed. It's not too late to say, "I'm proud of you," or "I see how hard you're trying." It's not too late to show that even in old age, we are still growing, still learning to love better. And if you've already said those things, if you've already softened, forgiven, opened your arms, then take comfort in that. Because you've given your children something more valuable than money, more enduring than inheritance. You've given them an example of what real love looks like when it's lived with humility and grace. There's no guarantee that every child will respond the way we hope. Some may carry their own pain. Some may still be distant, distracted, or unsure how to reconnect. But that doesn't mean your efforts are wasted. Sometimes the healing we begin today only blossoms in the years ahead. Sometimes it's the small shift in our tone, the quiet presence at the dinner table, the willingness to just listen, that changes everything. One man once told me, "I thought I was teaching my son how to be strong, but in the end, he taught me how to be gentle." That's the beauty of aging with an open heart. We not only pass on wisdom, we make space for new wisdom to enter. And it often comes from the very people we raised. So what can we do, starting now? We can forgive ourselves for the times we didn't get it right. We can reach out without pride or blame. We can create space for conversations that don't always need to fix anything, but simply hold each other's stories. We can stop measuring love by how often someone visits and start noticing the small gestures, the texts, the concern in their voice, the way they remember your favorite fruit when they drop by. That too is love. We can also care for ourselves, not just physically but emotionally. Take walks, eat well, find joy in hobbies, friendships, and the quiet beauty of everyday life. Because when we live with light in our hearts, our children feel it. They may not say it, but they notice. Aging doesn't mean disappearing. It means transforming into a calmer, wiser, more centered version of ourselves. Into someone who loves without needing to control, who is present without demanding attention, who trusts that what we planted long ago will still bear fruit, even if it grows slowly. And one last thought. If today, right now, your relationship with your child feels distant, don't let silence turn into a wall. Take a small step. Write a note. Send a message. Say, "I miss you," or "I'm here if you ever want to talk." You never know what doors that one act of vulnerability might open. Because the truth is, most children don't want to live far from their parents emotionally. They just don't know how to come closer when the air between is filled with old expectations or unspoken guilt. By showing them it's safe, that the past doesn't have to hold power over the present, you give them permission to return, not out of duty, but out of love. So here's to you, for your strength, your sacrifices, your willingness to grow even now. You deserve a peaceful, joyful old age, not just filled with comfort, but with meaningful connection. And to all the children out there who may be watching, if you still have your parents, call them, visit them, ask them questions, let them tell their stories. Because one day, you'll wish you had done more of that. Family is not always easy, but it is always worth the effort. Thank you for spending this time with me. If something I shared today touched your heart, feel free to share your story in the comments. I read everyone. And if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click that button. Let's keep walking this journey together, gently, wisely, and with open hearts. Here's to growing older with grace. Here's to healing. And here's to love that never grows old. See you next time.